We're always on the lookout for new things, what's going on. A lot of times, our biggest outbreak is something that we don't necessarily expect. This last year, it was cornleaf aphid. It's never cornleaf aphid, right? Like that never amounts to anything. But in 2024, it sure did. 2025, it could be something like that. If you were taking a safe bet, if you were wanting to, you know, safe and reliable, probably corn rootworm. Probably corn rootworm in northern Illinois. That's one that just kind of tends to wind up a little bit every year. It never really goes away. You never really have just a 1 year explosion. Uh, Much more of a reliable pest in that sense.
Reliable pest.
Yeah.
I like that term. I don't know whether farmers will or not, but
Yeah.
but nevertheless, we're not really. I think Joe Spencer would say we're not really managing corn rootworm all that well. We're still putting on a lot of anti-rootworm seed treatments and using anti-rootworm seeds. And we're not having many of it in central Illinois.
Yeah. In central Illinois, our rootworm populations are pretty low. We do have some evidence that we're using less rootworm BT in this area than we were. And in part because of that, in part because it's cheaper, right? In part, economics are driving a lot of that. The one thing we're doing in East Central Illinois that is wonderful for corn rootworm management is we're rotating. We're almost exclusively rotated corn and soybean. And when you look at where corn rootworm is a problem today in Illinois, it is almost exclusively in corn after corn, and it is exclusively in areas where there's a lot of corn after corn. So what we're not seeing right now is that variant pressure in areas that are almost exclusively rotated. We're seeing very little bit of that. What we are seeing is heavy pressure in some cases in especially long-term continuous corn, and then occasionally you'll get some injury to first-year corn in those areas. Like you're getting some kind of spillover from those continuous corn fields. You're getting maybe some extended diapause from northern corn rootworm in some of those areas. But the variant for us is barely on the radar, and as a result of that, rotating like we do in East Central Illinois, about the best thing you can do for corn rootworm management right now.
For the boys who are thinking about really early planting of soybeans, they're putting on seed treatments. Any particular insecticides that they should utilize, make sure that they get on there for an early planted soybean?
We don't have a lot of evidence of difference among the different insecticides we use in soybean. It would depend a little bit on the individual insect species you're dealing with. What we do find, of course, when we plant early, it's not so much that those insects are more active early as that when the soybean plant can't come out of the ground, when it's delayed, when it's cold, it either sits in the ground and rots or it develops slowly. You're given more time for those insect pests to tee off on them. And so usually when we see early season stand reduction from an insect pest, it usually is those earlier planted acres, or it's acres that were planted at a normal time and then we had an unexpected cold snap after that really slowed things down. That's usually the situation where we see some early season stand loss due to insects. And of course, that's the same situation where we see early season stand loss from disease and from other issues as well, right? Those things tend to sort of roll together.
What are you going to focus on your presentation here today?
Yeah, sure. Going to spend a lot of time talking about cornleaf aphid because it was such an unexpected thing for us. It's not an insect pest we see terribly often. I'll provide an update on corn rootworm, on our current corn rootworm situation, then talk a little bit about our work in soybean IPM, looking at the frequency of return on investment for different soybean insecticides, as well as, which pests are more likely to cause us problems in soybean.
Let's explore that IP if you've got time here. Let's
sure.
explore the IPM on soybeans.
Yeah, sure.
That's something that we've not talked about for a long time, maybe.
Yeah, well, and it's a study that we just started in 2024. It's a topic that we always touch on a little bit, but one that we don't have enough hard data on, and that's if you use a prophylactic insecticide. So you use a seed treatment, you use an R3 insecticide, you use an R5 insecticide, some combination of those three. How often does that pay off? How often does that preserve yield? And when it does, who was responsible? Why did that occur? What insect pests were in the system to lead to that yield loss in the untreated? The way we're getting at this, we're running a series of studies on our research farms where we control everything. We can do exactly the treatments that we want. We've got 4 of those sites. We're also looking for sites on farmers where we're evaluating the sorts of practices that they are doing. So an example of a site like that last year, we tested an R5 application on a field that had already gotten an R3 application to see if there was an additional benefit from that. And in that case, there was not, and our insect pressure was pretty low. But these are the kinds of questions you can't answer with a single site, even if it's a single site for multiple years, right? You really need to do this multiple years, multiple sites to get a good answer, because it's not just the answer is going to depend on what that insect pest complex looks like. We want to see what happens under a variety of different scenarios over several different years. Year 1 of the study, we did not see economic thresholds, so we did not see insect pests exceeding the thresholds that we recommend for control. And going right along with that, we did not see yield responses to these treatments in general. That's 1 year of data. It's 6 locations. We're hoping to do this for several years in a row, build up locations. We're also looking for farmers who want to work on this, who want to evaluate, maybe it's seed treatments, maybe it's their R3 application, maybe it's something completely different. We're pretty flexible on what we'll evaluate in those on-farm studies. And what we're trying to get at is, what are the practices that farmers can use that give them the best chance of providing a return on that investment.